everybody enjoying Inside Out so far? Give us a hell yeah, woo! Bring it out. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I am here joined by the wonderful Jess Holbrook from Microsoft AI. Jess, we're in unprecedented times, economically, technologically, organizationally, politically. It's a cliche at this point, so I'm not going to labor it, but I do want to know, well, we're clearly in a transitional moment, so how would you describe what's happening right now in product development?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anybody that's having a calm, collected time right now. Just to kind of check with the group, how many people are working, directly with or on an AI project or something like that? Okay, yeah, a lot of us. Yeah, I don't know anybody in the space who is feeling like they've got it all under control, like they're not behind. There's kind of this perpetual feeling of going faster and faster and faster. There's a perpetual feeling of like burnout is either here or around the corner. And I think one of the really challenging things is because we're currently in a platform shift. And so every time there's a technological platform shift, one of the hallmarks of them is that work accelerates. So if you go from the mainframe to PC, to web, to mobile, to cloud, and now to AI, they all almost always enable a faster style of work. And you also have that matched with a massive business opportunity that people see that they don't want to miss out on. So it is just going faster and faster and faster all the time right now. So just if anyone's feeling that, yeah, I don't know anybody who's not feeling that right now across the board.
Yes, and I want to dig into how this is going to impact the way that teams operate in the future, and I want to get your perspective on this because there's an article that was written recently by Marty Kagan from SVPG, the Silicon Valley Product Group. He gives us a new vision for product teams and how they'll operate. He broadly divides product teamwork between discovery, which is primarily about judgment, and delivery, which is primarily about process. He makes some interesting points about automation and how that fits into that, but we'll dig into that in a little bit. What I want to know first is how just the implications for researchers when it comes to team structure changing. So first of all, Kagan's first belief is that teams will get smaller.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think again it's in this context of a platform shift and in the context of tools that allow people to do things they couldn't do before. So I think that we'll see the normal kind of size of like what we count as a team shrink. I don't know if that means that overall headcounts or things like that at companies will change, although obviously we've seen that over the last few years. And so you'll have these kind of smaller, more autonomous teams. I think in the article he talks about a 20 to 30% reduction in the size of teams. Again, that's not layoffs, that's just the size of how you break up different work. And so I think that there's going to be more of these smaller, more multidisciplinary teams that are operating a lot more autonomously and have a lot more authority in decision making. And a big part of this is because we're shifting and we're not in any kind of system of optimization. So if you look at the mobile platform is incredibly mature, and you're in basically mass optimization. You're at the very top of the S-curve, and how do we kind of eke a little bit out more here and here? And when it comes to the shift to AI, we're still kind of groping in the dark, trying to figure out what the shape of the elephant is. And so if you say that's where we are and that's what we need to achieve, then you would actually try to get more and more people looking in more and more different ways as quickly as you can to figure out where the value is and where we should invest more.
And so you mentioned that these teams would be sort of smaller and cross-functional, and I think we're kind of touching on something that Kagan also mentioned, or that he didn't mention, because Kagan doesn't leave much room for researchers in his vision. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I look at it like, one of the other things he kind of talks about in there is he kind of parses things out between discovery and delivery, which is, kind of the classic thing is we have to figure out, well, what do we build? And then we have to figure out how we build it, or what's the right thing to build. And, if you look at it and say, actually the cost of delivery or the cost of execution is decreasing rapidly through all these tools, and I know it's not to be too zeitgeisty, but this vibe coding thing obviously has a ton of energy right now. But if you also look at those tools and say, this is probably as bad as they're ever going to be, right? Like they're unoptimized tools. They're just going to get better. And then you go, okay, so the cost of delivery is going way, way down. So then the value will move more from people who can deliver, because that becomes more commodified, to people who can discover better. And if I say, okay, so then it's going to move to people who try to figure out what they can, what we should build. That feels like a very user researchy, a very insights-focused thing. And so, kind of setting up maybe some of the other things we'll talk about, like I'm actually pretty optimistic about where things are shifting now for people who do what we do.
Yeah, I can see why. I can see why. And I think even though Kagan did leave research out of that vision, he was primarily talking to product managers. So we'll give him a pass. I don't think it was intentional.
I'm sure he's a great guy.
I've met him a few times. He's a great guy. So in the article, again, Kagan, he makes an interesting point about team topology. Just a fancy way of saying the scope of the team, the responsibilities, and what those teams will actually be doing. So can you unpack your thoughts on how different will the team topology or the scope of teamwork be moving forward with AI?
Yeah, I think that it moves. We're going to see a kind of a de-hierarchy. We're going to see a lot more lack of hierarchy and a lot more lack of top-down direction. Okay, we all did all this alignment and we settled on these plans, and now this team's going to go build this, and this team's going to go build this, and this team's going to go build this. And I think you're going to see a lot more bottoms up and small teams that are a combination of engineers. Some, a lot of engineers, or sorry, not a lot of engineers, but like more engineers than other people. Although it's kind of interesting of how that might shift with the emergence of these tools. You're going to have product, you're going to have design, and then research is going to, I think, be probably allocated to some of the most ambiguous areas that these teams are working on, or they might actually operate a little bit separately from them, honestly, kind of trying to guide these teams into fruitful directions. But I also think that there's, a role, like being a UX researcher is really to zoom in on UX research for a second, is really a collection of tasks, and it's a collection of approaches, and it's a mindset. But we might be seeing some of those tasks and some of those ways of approaching things kind of unbundling. And I actually don't think that that's, again, a bad thing for people who do what we do. If we can kind of embrace some of the other tasks from some of the other roles, we can probably now do quite easily. And I'm happy to get into a little bit of that too.
Yeah, we will dive into that in a little bit. I want to kind of challenge your idea about this, flattening team structure, or smaller teams with a flatter structure, less hierarchies within organizations, because top-down planning isn't as important. Can we dig into that a little bit? Because what about all the kind of organizational structures that inherently kind of hold their political power and a lot of institutional clout? Say you've got middle management and maybe even senior management whose whole role is dedicated to these kinds of planning and steering of the ship. Do you think it's going to be difficult for organizations to let that go, or how do you think we are going to come up against those two forces?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you have organizations that are built that, nobody, a lot of times, nobody did anything wrong. Everyone built an organization or a structure that made sense given their business context at the time. But then it's kind of a question of, okay, but where are we now, and is it the right one? And so when you had a lot of resource scarcity, and you said we can't do everything, and actually the most precious thing in the world are developers' hands on keyboards, and we need to keep them coding, and this is the most precious resource we have, then you would organize things where you'd say, okay, well, we need a lot of coordination, we need to make thoughtful trade-offs, we need to think about dependencies, we need to do all these things. If those conditions aren't true, though, anymore, then you wouldn't organize your company that way, or you wouldn't organize your structures that way. And if you do, you'll actually be far less agile than groups where you say, well, no, actually, the cost of a prototype is going almost to zero. The cost of looking across insights is going to almost zero. The cost of creating mock-ups is going to almost zero. So then we don't have to worry about these very scarce resources that we once did, and we should invest our time in other places.
Okay, so teams are changing their size, they're changing their scope. Let's dig into a little bit of how ways of working are going to change, especially with regards to research, as cost of building moves to zero, and AI becomes just more commonplace in what we do. What parts of research do we emphasize, and which parts are becoming less relevant? And I just want to give you a quick example. Obviously, there's been a decades-long push to formalize UX research with reops, getting a seat at the table, building practices and systems. And there's a slight irony in the fact that these systems that we worked so hard to build and we celebrated are actually now quite brittle. So again, yeah, what parts of research are we supposed to emphasize now?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it is interesting is like the way that a lot of the current AI models and systems work is that the better you structured something, the better they are at doing that job, right? And so it's kind of interesting because like I would say like we probably hit something along the lines of like peak design systems. So we worked for a long, long time to create design systems, and we built these big teams, and we had to maintain them across these products. But now those are going to be one of the things that are probably pretty, I don't think we're going to require like these massive teams for that going forward. When it comes to research, I don't know, has anyone tried to do, in any of the like AI models now, a lot of them have this deep research function. Will you raise your hand if you've tried to like deep research something? Okay, so there's, me too, I've set up a few. If you haven't, they're quite impressive. You can put in a pretty long prompt. It will do the long run thing, so it'll run for like 15, maybe 20, maybe 30 minutes. But what it returns to you is like a 20-page-ish report that's like quite in detail. And it is not this superhuman or this expert level, but it's quite good. And so I think that a lot of things that rely on a lot of digitized data will be pretty commodified. Because I kind of look at that and go, okay, this is probably how I'm going to do lit reviews for the rest of the time I do a lit review. Like, I'm not sure why I would do it another way at this point. Whereas I think we will actually lean in a lot to then things that are not digitized. So you have to remember, like, most of the world is still not digitized, right? Like most of the world exists outside of anything that has a digital record on it, and there's always going to be like more in the future, of course. When it comes to like the work that we do, I think that what we're going to see is there's going to be this stuff that's happening now that is more about like accelerating what we do. And so like Dovetail and others, it's like, okay, let me use an AI model to help me brainstorm, to help me draft something, to help me synthesize, maybe to help me label things. And that's great. That accelerates, what we do now, and those are valuable. But when I think about, the maximum value that I want from AI, when it comes to being a researcher or an insights person, is I think a lot about what I got from more senior researchers than me throughout my career and like what I get now. And one of the best things that they do is they get us to ask better questions. So if you go to a really more senior user researcher or an insights person than you, and you say, hey, I'm thinking of studying, I think I want to do a study on X, and I'm kind of thinking about doing it on this method and blah, blah, blah. It's kind of helpful if they're like, oh, well, you should kind of do this slight variant of X, or you should maybe think about this other method, or here's a way I figured out how to do it faster. But the most valuable thing is if you go, hey, I think I want to do a study on X, and they go, no, you don't. You want to do a study on this other thing. And it's because you didn't understand, they see the deeper line, or they see the bigger picture that you can't. And that's the thing that I really want. That's the thing that I think will be really revolutionary, because right now the models do really great interpolation between things that exist, and if that's the answer, that's helpful to me. But we really need them to do more of an extrapolation into a bigger and better idea that I can't see yet. But once they are able to do that, that's going to shift a lot of things.
Right. So at this current stage, you still think that AI is most useful at that structured level, at that design systems or research operations or templates and standardization, or helping you with productivity of repetitive tasks. But we might move into a world where that is also no longer true, so that could be the future there. But in terms of those skills that we should be emphasizing as researchers in today's age, you have a very interesting take on the importance of taste. and where taste kind of resides in an organization. And as more of our systems and our ways of working are automated, there's this room for something a little bit more nebulous.
Yeah, this has kind of come up too, is, people express these ideas in whatever language they have, right? So you've kind of heard people talking about, oh, if everyone can vibe code now, or if everyone can do this stuff, which I'm not overhyping it. Also on the vibe coding, like, it is getting overhyped. It's okay. That's what happens every single time this happens. And in 1 year, it will be much, much better than it is. Like, at the next one of these, it will be kind of, I think it will be just commonplace that anybody can prototype something pretty darn good pretty easily. So I think that we're going to move way more to this place of discovery and trying to figure out what should we build. And if you look at how the models and the capabilities and the features, how quickly they're commoditized, like, it's shocking. Like, somebody comes out with something and it's commoditized across all the models within weeks, maybe months, and we've all like really acclimated to the pace of change. So, like, one way to think about this is if people remember the first time they interacted with like ChatGPT, which was GPT-3, right? Like, it was pretty mind-blowing for a lot of people. And maybe if you've been in the space for a while, you're like, okay, yeah, but it was kind of mind-blowing. If somebody released something of GPT-3 quality today, you'd just be like, this is trash. This is garbage. Like, what is this? Like, I can't believe, what are they doing, right? Like we get used to it so quickly. And so when I look at that, and I don't think that's slowing down. So from a technical and a capabilities perspective, nothing is slowing down. And so you say, what are durable advantages then in that space? Like, how would I make something that won't be kind of copied or commodified? And I genuinely think one of the very few enduring, durable advantages is how much you care and know about the people who are using your products. And that really feels like our thing, because you see this as well as you see a lot of companies where somebody releases a feature and everybody releases a feature, right? And it's because they don't have any point of view about where they're headed. They don't have any inspiration other than each other. And when you're stuck there, you're just kind of stuck in this loop. And a lot of these things are just random experiments, and then somebody kind of like jumps on it, and we all just cluster there. But one of the most enduring advantages is going to be if you know and you care and I don't like the word obsess. I've always found that the whole obsessed thing has always rubbed me the wrong way. So I like to say more like, if you really care about other people doing better because of the things you built, then I think that's going to be an enduring advantage for some of these companies.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I can see where you're coming from as the cost of building goes to zero, and basically everything from design to the code that we build is commoditized. The last sort of remaining thing that we have is what we know about our customers and like how we leverage that unique position. Maybe it's an organizational position, like every organization has their own knowledge of the customer, or if it's on an individual level where every researcher, or perhaps we can even be more generalized, people who work on product teams can use that knowledge that they have as their kind of last remaining advantage. It's not something that's on ChatGPT.
Yeah, it will be what distinguishes you from the competition in a lot of ways. And there's part of me that like loves this, because this is, in theory, what we've always wanted, right? Like, human-centered design people who are people who care about people more than they care about tech, but like it when the two of them come together. Like, haven't we always said this? Haven't we always, like, this is our thing, right? Is like, no, this is this is the thing we should focus on. This is where we should put our energy. This is what should distinguish us. And I think that as the technology comes down as well, the barriers of influence are going to come down a lot. Because for anyone who's been doing this for a while, there's all these frustrations that have come up before. I do the research, but the designer won't design it. I do the research, but the PM ignores it. I do the research, but the engineers won't build it. And like, a lot of those walls are coming down. Like, a year from now at this, I wouldn't be shocked if we could be doing something. Let me give you an example of like where I think, because I've been talking a little abstractly. Let me like give you a concrete example. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if we get to a place where we say, what I'm going to do is, as I'm interviewing somebody in a study session, we're going to actually feed that dialogue straight to a model. Sorry, just to be super clear, obviously consent and the person knows about it and all this kind of stuff. But we're going to feed that directly to a prototyping model as they're speaking. And so I'm going to talk to them for about 20 to 30 minutes, and they're going to describe their life and describe what they'd like. And then we're going to, the prototype will be built in the background. Nowadays it's taking like 5-10 minutes. It'll probably be faster in a year. And then literally the next half of the session will just be, so here's the prototype we built exactly for you to give feedback on it. I think that will be a commonplace way we will do our job. And I'm not talking about like 5 years or 10 years. I think like in a year, maybe 2 years. And I'm really not, and I'm super trying not to be hyperbolic. Like I don't have anything to gain from like trying to hype it up or whatever. Like that's what I genuinely think we will be in a year.
Okay, so let's dig in a little bit more to like what sort of skills should researchers be getting better at? Like where should they be emphasizing their development, their career development? How should they be thinking about their role in the org? What are the best researchers doing that you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, part of this will be, I do think letting go a bit or having a loose grip on what you've thought being a UX researcher was or an insights person was, and being aligned for, why you're doing what you're doing, but then becoming flexible in how you might accomplish that. Like, my model for what I've been doing most of my career is whatever, it might sound trite, but like, I'm just trying to make people's lives better. The way I'm trying to do that is by shipping products that improve their life in some tangible way. The way I try to make those products is through research. Like, that's the chain. So I look at like, how can I more effectively do those things? And so maybe I step into a role that looks a little bit more like what a PM does right now. Like, I have research at the core, but there's no reason I can't come back. So now I come back and I say, here's a report, and here's what we should do, and here's some recommendations. Today, and especially in a year, there's no reason I can't come back and go, here, I built this prototype of what I think we should build, and here's basically, it's based on this research, and here's what we have here. And to have really like high ownership and agency to try to get that shipped or experimented with or flighted or something like that. This is one of the other parts that I kind of worry about with our discipline and like what we do is we've had a historical aversion or a lack of willingness to jump in with ownership or like to push through or to really like try to get something, to fight for something. And I don't know why that is. Like, it's the nature of our work. We're always kind of trying to collect more data. I think it's one of our strengths, right? We see things from lots of angles, so we want to see things from lots of angles and consider them. But I think we really will need to amp up I don't do research. I do research so I can create something and try to get it in people's hands quickly. And I have ownership over that, and I want that. And I do believe that, like, if you think you're building something that will make somebody's life better, you almost in some ways have like a moral obligation to make that happen. You're like withholding something that could make somebody's life better if you don't, or if you let something get in your way or something like that. And I know that's tough, and I know that's not why a lot of us got into the field, right? There's probably somebody out there that's like, well, yeah, Jess, I would have been a PM if I wanted that to be like what I did. But I ask you to be open to it, because I think that's one of the meta skills that we need to get.
Okay, so let's recap for a second. Roles are going to collapse into a generalized goo of cross-functional skills where the kind of weight of importance, the keys to the castle, is going to be owned by those who can answer very tough questions about, or who know how to ask the right questions and get the right answers to some of the toughest problems about our customers and make the best products. So this is pretty daunting, I think, for a lot of people, this idea that maybe you don't have the role UX research in the future. Maybe you don't have a product management role. Like, maybe these small teams are simply collaborating on building the right amount of knowledge and using automation where it makes sense to execute at speed. is this current accelerated present that we're in, is it actually a permanent state, do you think? Or does it settle into something a bit more stable?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think we're having a bit of a task unbundling. And I think the other thing to remember, though, is like it's not just us. This is happening to all the roles. So, I'll talk to some people and they're like, oh, I'm worried like automation is going to automate UX research away or whatever. And it's like, well, automation comes for tasks in all roles eventually. Like that's how we build things. That's how things kind of progress. But you have to look at it like, well, no, you can go do part of another role now. Like, yeah, maybe something got commodified or something in our role, but like this is happening across the board. And I think that we're doing this unbundling and everyone's trying to figure out what the new rebundling is. So we'll reach some new equilibrium because like, to go back to design systems, like you didn't need that until you had massive platforms and companies with many, many apps or experiences where people expected uniform experiences across them. So then you form a new equilibrium around that reality. And so we don't know what the equilibrium is now because we're in transition, and so people are like trying to figure this out. It will remain accelerated until we do, for sure. Until we reach some form of an optimization phase, and then people will go, oh, okay, now we're going to like optimize here, and we're going to maybe reverse. But also if I look at each platform shift, we never reverted back to the speed of the previous platform shift, right? Like things never went back. So we are step functioning up. It will remain. But then also we're going to figure out sustainable ways to do it, not what a lot of people are feeling, which is an unsustainable approach to this. But yeah, and I think that customer connection and staying close to people and being inspired by people, I see it as ascendant in this, and I think that that's going to be a really good thing.
Yeah, I'm actually interested to get a little bit of a show of hands from the audience. Who is excited by this this kind of prognostication, this idea for the future where there are small, agile, autonomous teams where the difference in your role might not be as significant as it is today? You might not even have a role with a name that you have today. But you will be working on the kinds of things that researchers generally do really care about, understanding customers, deeply caring about the problems that you're trying to solve and delivering solutions. Who is excited by that kind of future? Hands up. Okay. Who's kind of a little bit worried about that kind of future? Hands up. A few, okay. And who absolutely doesn't want a bar of that future? Who wants to go back? That's probably a good thing.
There's a lot of
okay,
I think there's a lot of, you just said a lot of things, Jess, and I'm not sure how much of it I believe, but maybe, I don't know, dude.
I think it's quite exciting. I think if not exciting, then at least I think it's time for a change, and I'm excited to see where AI is going to go and how it's going to impact change.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it is a change is coming, and so it is an embrace it. And I think we're well positioned to embrace it and actually be more influential, deliver more value to people, focus organizations more on people than we have in the past, if we embrace that. And I worry that the problem is if we don't, there's going to be this kind of, there's a potential like usurping of things. So there's never been a lack of an appetite to rebundle human-centered design. So every once in a while, my favorite is like when they kind of came out with Lean, right? It was just like, oh, actually we need to do things super different. We need to talk to people, we need to build a prototype on what they did, and we need to iterate on that, and we need to do it quickly. And I was like, yeah, you mean human-centered design? Like that's kind of like what we've been advocating for. And so it kind of feels like it's happening again a little bit, to be honest. And I want us to grab and own our thing. Like it's our thing. And not to let it happen again, because I do think we'll make better things, and people's lives will get better if we do.
Okay, I think that is all we have time for today. Can we please have a big, warm round of applause for Jess Holbrook, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, Jess.
Thanks, John.